Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this next session. We're going to start with some CUGC trivia first, so keep your eyes peeled and see if you know the answer. Just as a reminder, we're going to want to see the answers in the group chat, not the Q&A. And it looks like a cooler is up for grabs. So the first question is, what is the name of the deepest lake in the US? This is a good question. Luckily, the answer is written down for me to read because I don't know the answer off the top of my head. Oh, we've got Chris W. with the first answer, so that looks great. So the answer is Crater Lake. So our next question is, what is the deepest lake in Canada? Another good question. It's a few lakes, a few options, but only one of them is the deepest. This might be a tough one. No. Oh, we've got Fatin M with the answer. Great Bear Lake. So we're next going to hear from Control Up from James Jordan. So James is going to join us.
Yep, I'm here with you.
Great. I'll let you take over.
All right, thank you. So my name's James Jordan. I go by JJ, and I'm a sales engineer here in Control Up. And I'm going to kind of give you a 5-minute overview. And just so you know, if you want to know a little bit more, come on over to our booth, and we can give you a lot more in-depth information. So we're going to start with what are some of today's EUC challenges. So let's kind of look at some of those, and you can see that there's manual, tedious management. So it's all those things that you do on a regular basis that you just don't want to take your actual physical cycles to do. That we can actually do automation. The unpredictable user experience, we can actually manage through that, whether it's your VDIs or your published applications, however you want to, however you deliver your user experience. It's the blame storm of, is it network, is it security, is it whatever? We can actually help get down to the root of all of that. The long, medium time to resolution. Within seconds, we can get down to that root cause of most issues. And at that point, be able to remediate as well many of those issues. And if not, then we can actually, at least we know where we're at and where we're going. And then we can also get very in-depth. So we can go all the way down to that process level to be able to see exactly what that culprit is, what that root cause is, and then remediate as well. So we can also, so some of the self-healing stuff that we have, capacity planning. So we're able to help you determine, okay, are you overprescribed, underprescribed? You have your expert community, which helps you. We have our community script actions, remediation within the console, so we're not sending you all over the place to take those actions. We can benchmark to get you to that baseline, so what's in and out of range. It's real time. We're updating every 3 seconds. So we're looking at actually what's happening in your environment right now, not 5 minutes from now, not an average of 5 minutes from now. We're actually looking right now. So we're getting all your peaks and valleys. I mentioned it before, automation, to be able to take care of some of those things that you just want to get done. Or you're at night and you're having, you don't want to get woken up at 3 in the morning, something that can be done in an automated fashion. And again, that quick analysis. We're also, so we're also looking, we can learn, we're user specific, we're org specific. We have the manual actions, the guided with our virtual expert, the guided actions, and the automation as well. We can detect events from the performance, the logs, any configuration, and we're in guest, so we're actually gathering those metrics from within the guest. And also we use API-driven metrics for your vCenter and your backend, Citrix and so on and so forth. And then what we have is our hybrid cloud, and this is really the power, because a lot of solutions out there, you have to have a lot of on-prem infrastructure. For us, we actually have a couple of machines on-prem. We collect all the data, and then we manage all of the storage and SQL and all the backend databases. We give you all of that metrics that we're able to really provide fast, on time, real time, and then able to give you that historical view as well without you managing the brunt of potentially terabytes of data. So again, I wanted to have you guys come over to our booth and give you some really good in-depth view, and also we can set up a time that we can do a customized demo for you in your environment. Again, I appreciate your time, and I look forward to see you in the booth.
Thanks, JJ. Definitely go head over to Control's booth to check them out. Next up is Matt Brooks. Matt is with Citrix, and he will be telling us about learning a flexible approach to implementing multi-factor authentication for Citrix Gateway with nFactor. Welcome, Matt.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Excited to be here. So yeah, multi-factor is a pretty hot topic these days. So looking forward to spending some time talking about it. I'm a technical architect with Citrix Marketing. I've been with Citrix about 10 years now, based in the DC area. And I've been to, I've been to some of these local CUGC meetings out here, and then I've been to some other ones online. And I just want to say, I think CUGC and what you all do is very important to Citrix. The company really relies on you to be ambassadors of Citrix technology. And so I'm hoping to enlighten you a bit on another aspect of our technology today, which is multi-factor authentication, or MFA for short. Specifically, we're going to discuss implementing that with Citrix nFactor, which is our extensible and flexible approach to configuring multi-factor authentication on Citrix ADC and for Citrix Gateway virtual servers, load balancing virtual servers, or for unified gateway content switch virtual servers. So we'll cover using LDAP plus one-time passcodes or passwords, if you will, in a few different formats. Now we'll discuss doing email OTP, where the passcode is emailed to the user. We'll talk about push OTP, where the OTP is initiated and a push notification goes to the user's mobile device through the Apple APNS or Google GCM networks. And obviously that's a popular method because it avoids having the user enter a code or copy and paste a passcode. And then we'll also cover what's called native OTP, where the passcode is generated by an authenticator app. After we get into those OTP flavors, we'll dig into nFactor, the Citrix methodology for implementing MFA. We'll do an overview of other types of nFactor policies besides OTP. And also we'll cover how nFactor applies to Citrix Workspace Service. So briefly, let's talk about why we care about multi-factor authentication. The Verizon Data Breach Report, it's a popular annual report on cybersecurity incidents. Back in 2017, it reported that the majority of hacking-related breaches, rated 81% to be exact, leveraged lost, stolen, or weak credentials. Victims included large Fortune 500 companies, and most experienced significant financial losses. Now, a few years later, in the latest report, it's practically the same at 80% for those same circumstances. So lost, stolen, or weak credentials are still a really big issue, and implementing multi-factor authentication is really the best solution to remediate that. Of course, with the caveat that enterprises need to walk a fine line. They need to implement it to increase their security posture while having minimal impact on user experience. So what is a one-time password or passcode, or OTP for short? Well, unlike static passwords that we're all familiar with, it's only valid for a short amount of time. So this mitigates the risk that it could be used to impersonate a user if it was intercepted. And now there's several ways it can be generated and delivered to users. So first, let's talk about email OTP. One of the biggest advantages of email OTP is that everyone has an email client. So you can get users up and running with email OTP, fairly quickly. A downside is that users have to log into their email and they have to copy and paste the code, which could be a bit of a hassle on a regular basis. And sometimes email delivery can be delayed, and that's a problem because OTP is time sensitive. Let's look at a high-level email OTP authentication flow with nFactor. So the diagrams I'm going to use mostly focus on integration with Citrix Gateway for Citrix virtual apps and desktops environments. So we'll kind of interchange Citrix Gateway and Citrix ADC. But as we'll see in a bit, nFactor can also be used with load balancing or those content switch vServers. So first, the way the flow goes is with Citrix Workspace client or browser, user connects to Citrix Gateway hosted FQDN. It submits their domain credentials. Then it authenticates with Active Directory and gathers their email address from an attribute in their AD object. Then it originates an email containing the OTP code via an SMTP server. Next, the user receives the email. They copy that alphanumeric string into a login field. And the last, the user submits the OTP code back to the ADC, and they get complete the multi-factor authentication and get access to their apps. So here, let's take a look at the user experience followed by the admin experience. So first, the user is going to connect in their browser to the FQDN for the site. They'll enter their username and password. Here's their SAM account name, password. We'll see how to swap out that green legacy NetScaler screen in a bit. Then on the second screen, they're asked for that OTP. They'll drop into their email client. Here we're just in a online Gmail. We'll copy that code into the field and click login. And here we see we're just hitting a standard IS site. So this is using a load balancing virtual server. So now let's take a look at the setup. Here in our GUI, we're going to go into load balancing virtual servers. We'll see that we have one for IIS. We see that it's SSL offload. It has a certificate bound to it. And we'll look at it, it's just talking port 80 to a default IIS server in the back end here. If we look further, if we scroll down in the vServer details, we'll see under authentication a few parameters here that link this vServer back to the AAA vServer. So here we have the authentication FQDN entered, and then we set it to authentication virtual server. And then we specify that and along with a profile. Now, if we look at that AAA vServer, we'll see first that we have a certificate bound, and then we have an authentication policy bound here. So we'll drill into that policy. We'll see first that we have just a standard LDAP policy. And then we'll go a little bit deeper and look at that binding. We'll see that it links to a factor. We'll talk more about what that is in a bit. That factor is the email policy. So here we see we have an admin username to log into the mail server, the string we present to the user, and then we have the email address attribute. This is what we're going to pull from that user's AD object. And then we're going to get that again through this policy we just passed on the way in here, this LDAP policy. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that. We'll see up top, it's a standard LDAP policy, nothing special. It's talking to AD, we have our base DN, the bind DN. But down towards the bottom is where we have it gets interesting. This is where we're going to specify the alternate email. And you see the other mailbox there. Now if we swing over to AD and look at that user object, we have the ADSI edit open here. You can see literally we have that string in there. So, there's a lot of ways to populate AD attributes. We won't get into that, but this is something that, we did in advance. We'll talk a bit later how there's some options where you can have users populate that automatically. So a few tips for implementing email OTP. Again, you figure out provisioning those users. Also, you need to make sure that when you can contact your ADC can log into your Exchange, it can contact it and originate those emails. So I think by default, Exchange is going to require Kerberos. So you need to allow it to do username and password as well to let the ADC to log in and originate that email. You can also use cloud email in the cloud. You can just go to a Gmail site like secure, but you have to make sure that the secure SMTP port is open 587. Otherwise, the ADC is not going to get there. Last, I'd recommend increasing the OTP timeout. It's 30 seconds by default. So, if you calculate potential SMTP delays and then, users having trouble copying and pasting, that's going to avoid them from failing unnecessarily. So let's talk a bit about the architecture, how we go about that configuration. So first we have the AAA server. This is factor 0, if you will. It's a starting point for MFA, and it's referenced by another gateway vServer, load balancer, or content vSwitch, as we mentioned, are supported. It's going to link to a policy label, and this acts as a bucket for a set of policies and pertinent schema. Now, schema are what control what the user sees in their landing page, and it controls the fields and types of variables that the user sees or that they're stored and referenced throughout the flow. And the policy is something that's used, throughout the Citrix ADC. It's, maps to the actions, and then the actions are the heart of the authentication method. There's various methods that are supported, SAML auths, or we'll talk more about those in a bit. So here's a high-level look at kind of the flow we followed to set up email OTP. There's that virtual server, and then we dropped onto that LDAP policy. It had an action, and then once that LDAP was successful, the user enters their domain credentials successfully. That pushes off to another policy label with the email OTP policy and its action, and they have their login schemas. So I present this partially to make it explain email OTP and to show a little bit how it can start to get a bit complex. Now, if we go ahead and we skip ahead to that same kind of high-level view for push OTP, we can see that the number of boxes and the complexity increases quite a bit. We'll look at a couple of video demos as well for push OTP, and you can see that there's a couple of different sets of flows. One is where the user actually registers their mobile device to do the authentication. Then there's another one where once they're registered, they can authenticate and get to their apps by entering that push OTP factor. So this, because of the complexity, what we came up with was this nFactor visualizer. So this is a nice feature that you find in the AAA section on Citrix ADC, where you can kind of follow visually setting up the different policies and schema. Now, you still need to do some legwork to configure the policies, but I think this really helps logically put together those factors and the policies that are in them. So now let's talk a bit about push OTP in depth. The main downside of push OTP, first of all, is that it requires a mobile device. So, for contractors that are coming in or employees that don't have them, it's just plain not going to work. Also, if, users lose their mobile device, they may be offline until they can work it out with IT. But of course, a big advantage of it is that it's easy. There's no passcode to enter or copy. Users just push a button and they get access to their apps, which provides a really good user experience. And so here we see the push OTP flow. It's going to start again with that workspace client connecting to the gateway, the FQDN on that. The gateway is going to store a token and authenticate with Active Directory. It's going to register the user's device and initiate a push authentication request. That push authentication request is relayed through Citrix Gateway service, and that talks to App APNS or the Google Cloud Messaging to send that push notification. And in the final step, the Citrix SSO app on the client's smartphone is going to, initially for the registration bit, they're going to handle the registration and exchange a shared key with the gateway. And they're also, once they're registered, they're what's going to, when they receive that push notification request, they're going to reach out to gateway and pass a OTP token to complete the authentication. So now let's take a look at the user and admin experience as well. So again, the user is going to start in their browser for push OTP. They hit the FPDN for their site. They'll enter their username and password and submit. And then here we can see they're going to, on their mobile device, they're going to get this request to allow. Once they accept that, that completes the second factor. So in this case, we've already registered. We're just doing the authentication step. Here we can see we're on our workspace site. We'll go ahead and launch the virtual desktop and see that that works. So obviously everything's similar after that multi-factor authentication occurs. On the admin side, here we under security, AAA. We'll drill down into policies, authentication, advanced policies, and actions. So we'll look at, we have a couple of LDAP policies. The first is nothing special. This is just standard LDAP talking to AD. The second is where it's similar up top, but down low we have a couple of differences. First, there's a AD attribute user parameters where we're going to store a shared key. Then we have this push policy. This is what's going to allow the ADC to communicate with the workspace instance in Citrix Cloud and initiate that push notification. So here we're already authenticated in our Citrix Cloud instance, and under Identity and Access Management, API access. Here's where we'll create a client to integrate with the ADC. So you can see I had one created. I'll go ahead and create another one. And you see it'll give us a couple of parameters, and it's something we'll need to save off or copy because it's a one-time deal. It's to keep it secure. So we can see here's that ID, unique ID, and then the secret, which you're going to copy off. And then the customer ID is on the same page up top. Again, those go into that policy field, the action. So just a few fields to populate with that for the push policy. Then if we go back up to the AAA V server here, we're going to nFactor flows. And this time, instead of using the policies and linking them, we're going to use the nFactor visualizer. So we start here in our first factor. We're going to create a policy for registration. So in that set of diagram, the diagram of a set of blocks, this is going to be the top set of blocks where we're going to first look for a parameter to identify that we need to register this user. And in this case, we're looking for a specific HTTP variable. It's NSC_TAS. And for this, we're going to look for a specific string. So this is something the user is going to put in the URI portion. After that URL, they're going to put / manage OTP in this case. And this is kind of one method to get it started. There's other methods. And you can also add to this expression to lock it down, for example, just the private addresses to kind of secure it better and allow users only to do this inside the corporate network. So go ahead and create that that policy, and its purpose in life is just to identify whether the user needs to register. So then we'll go ahead and create another factor after that. Once that passes, it'll run off to this factor, and first we'll add a schema to this. So this is where we're actually going to ask the user for information. So we'll give it a name, and here we have there's a couple of dozen schemas that are pre-canned. So ours, we'll scroll down and see we're going to pick single auth manage OTP. And so we create that schema, and that's going to work in conjunction with the policy here that we're going to create. And so here we're going to give it a name, and then we're going to specify an action that we already created that we looked at the beginning here. So this is just a standard LDAP policy, and we want this to run, so we're just going to set it to true. once we get to this point, we want to just validate that user, get its domain credentials, and know that he's allowed to, register for push. So once that passes, we hit the green plus sign that has us create a second factor, or the last factor here in this flow. And here's where we're gonna work on setting up the push, doing the registration. So we'll give that a name, and then so we're gonna specify the LDAP OTP policy that we looked at. This is true at this point in the flow. We still want this to just run. We'll add that, and that's it for the registration flow. So now we'll go back to our factor 0 here, the first factor, and then we'll add another policy. And this will be the policy to start us off for registration. This will be for users that don't have that /manage OTP, and they just want to authenticate. They've already registered for push. They're just waiting for that push to come up. So we'll hit the green plus, create another factor linked to this after they enter the credentials. Actually, it's not entering the credentials there. This is just sending us down. If there's no /manage OTP, it's sending us along this flow. Here's where we're asked for the two values. This is where it's going to first ask for the domain credentials. Then after, it's going to initiate that push. And so again, this is the policy we created above. And then also we'll create a final factor here. This is where the push will take place, and the user will complete their multi-factor authentication. They'll get that push on their mobile device, and it'll go out through the Citrix Cloud API there. That's the setup for push OTP and the user experience. Pretty straightforward and pretty nice user experience. A few tips. Well, you want to make sure that the LDAP admin has that's in your LDAP policy has rights to modify user attributes in AD. So they don't need to be domain admin, but they have to be able to modify that user parameters to specify that shared key there. And users must use the Citrix SSO client. So we'll see that native OTP supports different types of authenticator apps. And also but in this case, they have to use our SSO client. And then the on-prem Citrix gateway, it must be able to reach the Citrix gateway service, because as we talked about, it proxies those push notifications. So if for some reason it can't get out to Citrix Cloud, you need to work with the network team to make sure they open up the appropriate ports there. So we covered email OTP and push OTP in detail. And then now, last but not least, let's talk about native OTP, or more appropriately, time-based OTP. So if you're demoed out, we're not going to demo that. We'll just talk about the flow a bit. So the downside of native OTP is that it has to be copied from an app, into the client. It's similar to email OTP. An upside is that the authenticator app that it's built from runs on a variety of platforms, and it's generated locally on the device. So if that mobile network is down, for example, that generates those push notifications, or email's not working, the native OTP is available. It'll always work. And so it's able to do this because after the client authenticator app exchanges a shared key with the Citrix ADC, they each generate OTP based on that key and the current time. So it's important that the time is correct on the client's endpoint and the ADC. And this allows them to be in sync and know when the user enters the code, the gateway knows what the code should be, and allows them to authenticate appropriately. And so here we see specifically the native OTP registration flow. You see a lot of similarity. The user connects to Citrix Gateway. In this case, similarly to push, that we put in manage OTP. Again, this could be any string. It authenticates with AD, completing the first factor. It offers a form to the device that can generate a time-based OTP. So then the client selects add device, and that form presented by a gateway. The gateway presents a QR code to exchange the shared key. The client scans the QR code with their authenticator app and then stores that shared key. Then last gateway stores the shared key in the user's Active Directory object. And then once the user is registered, of course, they can follow the authentication flow. And that'll start with the client connecting to the Citrix Gateway FQDN, submitting their domain credentials. Then they'll authenticate with Active Directory, completing the first factor. The gateway will offer a form to enter the time-based OTP, and it's a 6-digit code that the client will enter, and they're going to get that again from that authenticator app. And the last gateway validates that OTP using a hash with the shared key, stored in that user's AD object. So that's kind of the flow for OTP, all very similar, and as we talked about, all have some kind of advantages and disadvantages. So now let's, we're doing on time. I think we're in good shape. So let's do an overview of some of the many other types of nFactor policies here. So we talked about OTP in depth, and the Citrix nFactor supports like a variety of other methods. Here you can see some popular ones. This is not a complete list. We have reCAPTCHA, cookie, SAML, OAuth, endpoint analysis results can be used. With self-service password reset, this is where the user can be asked questions and they can enter their private email and initiate email OTP based on what they enter. We can do group extraction, kind of use their domain object and pull out what groups they belong to, and then give them a different set of authentication policies and actions based on which groups they're a member of. You can do, certificate, LDAP, radius, Kerberos, NTLM, EULAs, where we ask the user if they're going to accept a license agreement or not, and so forth. And I have a few slides here to kind of go through our documentation. We have a good set of documentation on each of these, and so here's the one for email OTP. Here's the docs for push notification for OTP. Here's native OTP. Here's the reCAPTCHA. This is a popular one to avoid protect against bots. It's not too popular with users, so not great user experience, but it's has its use out there. And again, this is a cookie. This is where the ADC can set a cookie on their device, right? It can check whether the user's been in before, or validate certain parameters that it wants to store there. We have SAML plus certificate. Obviously, SAML is a very popular format for exchanging authentication. We support OAuth, and this is what we use. We'll talk about in a bit to integrate workspace with Citrix Gateway, Citrix ADC, and its OAuth obviously is popular with a lot of websites, SaaS sites. Endpoint analysis. Endpoint analysis is a great Citrix ADC feature that's been around a long time. So nFactor can use endpoint analysis results to determine whether a user can continue in their authentication flow or to send them on a different path in terms of types of authentication. This is the self-service password reset. And again, I was mentioning that you can throw out a set of questions, right? This is stuff where the user would have to enter things that they'd already validated, who's their teacher to kind of reset their domain password. There's group extraction. Again, this is a good way to kind of split out different branches of nFactors. You may want to have, for example, a CXL group where they get maybe less stringent authentication requirements to improve their user experience. And this is the EULAs. This is usually just a yes or no. The user accepts or they don't accept, and they're not allowed to authenticate, or they get more stringent authentication options. So now let's. What about Citrix Workspace? So we talked a lot about using Gateway and ADC on-prem, but obviously Citrix Workspace hosted in Citrix Cloud is very important to Citrix and our customers today. And we're going to tell you everything that we discussed with nFactor that can be utilized with Citrix Workspace. So we can see that, while there's a recent screenshot of in Citrix Cloud that we can see that Workspace supports many authentication types, and the list is growing. There's still a lot of nFactor policies, that we discussed that it doesn't support. And so simply by front-ending those policy flows that we showed how to set up with an OAuth policy that integrates with an on-prem ADC, we can utilize it with our workspace. So here, we'll take a look at that. And here we're going into OAuth IDP policy. And we're going to go ahead and do an add. See, we're just going to give it a name here. And then we'll add an action. And so we're going to give this a name. Again, we're going to reach back out to Citrix Cloud and gather some details. If we navigate over to Identity and Access Management, we're going to go down into Citrix Gateway here. So we're going to enter the FQDN. This is going to map directly to our AAAV server in this case. It's going to do a detect to do a quick ping there. We see again half of the handful of information we need to get out: the client ID, the secret, and the redirect URL. So the client ID is the second field here. We're also going to paste that value into the audience field. The secret we're going to copy off, and that goes into the client secret. And obviously you don't want to share that. This one I've deleted for the demo. And then for redirect URL, we're going to paste that into the redirect field. And that's it to set up the OAuth IDP policy. We're going to set that to true. We want that to run. And we're going to bind this action to the OAuth policy. And so now we're going to navigate to our workspace FQDN. And so here we're going to enter your username and password, and see we're redirected to our Citrix Gateway. And then here we're going to enter an OTP code that we got from email, the same as we showed from the Gmail client. And then we can see where we're logged into our Citrix workspace. And so we have all of our apps, desktops, and feeds. And we did that using email OTP, the same Citrix ADC feature. And so we can see now the landing page had the legacy NetScaler name and look and feel. So here's a CTX that we can use to update that. First, we copied off this logon point directory, and we downloaded this logon point zip. Then we went ahead and unzipped that. And so we're going to copy that back over to the file system on the ADC. It's under the var netscaler login directory. So we take off that old directory we backed up, and we drill down and copy in that new logon point directory. And it's a small set of files just to change that landing page. And when we refresh, so now in the Citrix ADC, the landing page is going to have that workspace look and feel. And here's the CTX. It's 258.331. So that was a lot of information. I hope you got something out of it. There's definitely a lot of resources for you to work through. You can go on Citrix Tech Zone. I put out a few different POC guides where you can go step by step through setting up those different forms of ODP. There's a couple of links to a couple of past synergies where they really drill into the kind of the architecture we touched on. Of course, when it's well documented on Citrix.com, and there's also a lot of CTPs out there with good content. So look for those. There's too many to name, but a lot of good content out there. So, to wrap it up again, we discussed multi-factor authentication using nFactor to implement it, several of the policy types, the different OTP types, the architecture and policies, and then Visualizer. Visualizer is a nice little tool to help you kind of build it out once you get those policies set up. And then obviously, again, remember that this does integrate with Citrix Workspace. Okay, so I think think we have time for some questions now. Let me take a look. Supporting paying at Citrix Cloud as MFA. Yeah, I don't have a ETA for that, but I can tell you that as you saw in the snippet I put out, there's a lot of forms of MFA that are being worked on, and a lot of third parties. It started with Okta, and I imagine may well extend to paying at some point. But yeah, as you saw as well, yeah, you'll see in your Citrix Cloud instance that's kind of our formula. We'll start with a tech preview, and then it'll go live. So once you see it in tech preview, you can imagine that once the product managers work through kind of any issues with it and get their documentation sorted, that they'll release it. So can we use all three forms of OTP at the same time? I'd say technically yes. You need to define which group they apply to, under which circumstances. So this has been asked before. For example, you can integrate policies like group extraction to identify just mobile users and send them to the push authentication route. Or you could do things like if user declines a EULA, not allow them to do push. Or the nFactor, you have a lot of flexibility. I think just the key is to make sure that you balance security with user experience. Okay. See which will AAA nFactor features become a part of Citrix Gateway Service? Well, that depends. And so if you're not familiar with it, Citrix Gateway Service is hosted in Citrix POPs around the world, and it's essentially the delivery arm for Citrix Workspace. And as we just discussed, the workspace authentication, user relies on Gateway to deliver that. And so, obviously it works with a lot of the Citrix Cloud services and microservices. And as you saw, it's used to proxy out those push notifications. But for the front end, for workspace authentication option, and they're set up, done in Citrix Cloud, they're going to have the same look and feel as other Citrix Cloud services. So, those workspace authentication options will continue to grow, but you likely wouldn't see like the gateway GUI features like Visualizer migrated in the same format. Okay. See, and which versions support nFactor and which license is required? So in terms of versions, it's been out for a few years, starting the 11th series. So any recent version will support it. On the licensing front, it gets a bit tricky. So the advanced and premium licenses include all AAA features, but standard includes a smaller subset. So I'll refer you to your account reps to verify those licensing features. Disappear. I think time for one more question here. And could you clarify the difference between the use of Citrix AAA and Citrix Gateway? The Citrix Gateway virtual server is integrated with the Citrix AAA virtual server. That's where the nFactor policies are bound to. And unlike the load balancing virtual servers, the Gateway vServer must be bound to a non-addressable AAA vServer. And so, we had seen with the load balancing virtual server, it used an FQDN and the actual, I had an IP address on the AAA vServer. And, again, I would refer you to make sure you verify with your account team the licensing for the features, required there. Okay. All right, and somebody's been answering that. Yeah, okay, great. Okay, and I think that looks like that's it for questions. So thank you very much for everyone. Appreciate your time, and I hope I enlightened you a bit on MFA.
Thanks, Matt. That was great. I didn't realize there were so many options. So definitely looks like there's something for everybody, which is great. So thank you again. We're going to take a quick look, or not a quick look, We're going to have Avanti with a video, just a sponsor video. And also, you can make sure Matt's going to be hosting one of the round tables. So definitely, if you have more questions for him and you want a little face-to-face with him, take a look at that. And so Avanti's one of the leading companies that automates IT and security options from PCs to mobile devices, VDI, and the data center. Avanti discovers IT assets on-premise, in cloud, at the edge, and improves IT service delivery and reduces risks with insights and automation. Avanti is the industry leader in third-party patching, patch vulnerability scanning, and remediation. Very exciting news. Avanti has also just been added to Gartner's Leader Quadrant for service management software solutions. In addition, Avanti just launched a new hyper automation platform named Neurons. Neurons is a software as a service platform powered by advanced artificial intelligence and machine learning to self-heal and self-secure devices. Neurons also provides a variety of administrative and security actions for your entire IT estate, including discovery of assets, data consolidation, and reconciliation. Remote control systems. Remote control, software distribution, and self-healing workflows and integrations into other systems. Enjoy a deeper look into Neurons with this video, and make sure to stop by Avanti's booth to ask their top solution architects any questions you may have.
The world is changing fast. The demands of enterprise IT are growing exponentially. As remote working becomes the next normal, with employees working anywhere, anytime, expecting fast, personalized, consumer-like experiences. And with the explosive growth of endpoints, edge devices, and the data they generate, the cybersecurity threats are reaching catastrophic new heights. Hyperautomation, powered by artificial intelligence, machine and deep learning, is the only way to rise above these challenges. The Avanti Neurons are hyper-automation bots you need to transform your enterprise. Autonomously self-heal edge devices. Anticipate security threats and self-secure with adaptive cybersecurity. And deliver contextual, personalized user experiences. Significantly improve the accuracy, speed, and cost of services. Our customers reduced unplanned outages up to 63%. Resolve up to 80% of endpoint issues before users reported them. Discover 30% more assets, improving security posture. Decrease time to deploy security updates by 88%. Avanti Neurons. Always on, always working. Augmenting your IT teams with automation bots. Detect and resolve issues and security vulnerabilities. Proactively, predictively, autonomously, without impacting user and business productivity. Self-heal, self-secure, self-service, cloud to edge with Avanti Neurons.
Apologies, folks. There was definitely a bit of an echo in that video. We're not quite sure what happened. We're definitely going to be looking into it. So yeah, sorry about that again. Coming up, thanks to Matt and our sponsors. Finishing up our technical presentations, they are the CTPs, Shane Kleinhardt and Scott Osborne, talking about optimized Citrix experience for call center users. Meet us there by clicking on their session in the CUGC lobby.